cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. So, Fadeaway World had another one of their rankings, all-time rankings of each player at their position in a particular category. Now, I've already done this for small forwards and centers, so you can go check out our Fadeaway World Reactions playlist, so you can go check out those videos as well. Like I did before, I'll take a look at what they have for their players, and then, you know, maybe give my opinion, agree, disagree, and who I would put instead of the player they have and why. All right, so kicking this bad boy off, the greatest scoring power forward of all time, they have Karl Malone. I'm not going to disagree here. I think really the only other person you could probably throw in there to rival Karl Malone would probably be Dirk Nowitzki. And I could argue that Dirk Nowitzki was definitely a better pure scorer, or definitely a better pure shooter than Karl Malone. But Karl Malone, especially playing in his era, could play better from the post than Dirk Nowitzki, could shoot the mid-range well, was generally better in the interior, and could do more physically with his body than Dirk could. And Karl was an Iron Man, and he did it for a very long period of time. And longevity isn't everything, but shooting wasn't a weakness of Karl Malone. See, if Karl was just scoring in the paint but couldn't hit you for buckets from anywhere else, then I may reconsider strongly. But Karl Malone was a confident and fairly consistent mid-range shooter from about, I guess, anywhere on the court in the mid-range, and could do it in isolation too. I know, you know, he was the recipient of quite a bit of John Stockton passes, but I've seen enough of Karl Malone score in isolation, getting his own buckets without John Stockton, to come to the conclusion that he didn't need John Stockton. It was a luxury. It did make him easier for him at times, but I'm confident Karl Malone could have still got his buckets without John Stockton. No question about it. I have no problem with Karl Malone, and, you know, obviously he's one of the top scorers all time as far as most points accumulated. And he had a nice lengthy career at that. I have no problem going Karl Malone, man. He was definitely a power forward that could score the ball in a variety of ways. And you couldn't put him too many places where he was uncomfortable. I'm good with Karl Malone. Playmaking, they're going Draymond Green. Now, playmaking, just to be clear, is more than just passing, because they have a passing category as well. Passing is part of playmaking, but it's actually, you know, also includes orchestrating the offense, being able to put players where they need to be, running sets, understanding defenses, calling sets, yeah, like I said, directing players, and all of that contributing to making a play. Even like off the boards, keeping plays alive and creating off of that. Things like that. There's a lot of things to consider. Draymond Green, he's one of those ones where I'm just like, because I don't think Draymond Green would quite be the player he is if he was outside the Golden State Warriors in a different system. I think the Golden State culture and the style of offense they have implemented with each players playing in a specific role, and equipping Draymond Green with the weapons he needs to build on his playmaking prowess and abilities is definitely beneficiary. He's definitely a beneficiary of that. It benefits him. And I don't want to say that to take away from him, but it's just how I view his particular scenario with the Golden State Warriors. But then again, I have no evidence to say that, my belief that he would be something lesser than himself on a different team is actually true, because we just don't have the evidence. I don't have hard proof. It's just a feeling I have based on watching basketball and understanding basketball. That's the conclusion I've came up with. But I can also say that the other players, to some degree, benefit off Draymond Green's ability to understand the plays, to deliver the passes, to direct the players where they need to be, and understanding what Steve Kerr wants him to run. I can also say that as well. Let's say I'm unbiased. I'll try to be fair here as much as I can. And like I said, passing isn't everything, but watching Draymond orchestrate offenses, and he's not the only one that could do it. Steph Curry does it as well. But at times, Draymond Green is definitely the hub from that perspective. Given the responsibility he has as pretty much primarily the playmaker for the Golden State Warriors, that's like his major responsibilities on that team is to play make and to play defense. Other than that, he's not being looked to score. He's not being looked to do too many other things outside of playmaking and defense. And since that is one of his primary roles, he has the ability to saturate himself in that and bask in that glory, while other players, that wasn't their primary responsibility, regardless of how strong they were in that area. So Draymond has definitely been a product of the type of system and the role that has been asked of him. But the fact that he can do it and has the basketball IQ to do it and the ability to do it does say something. So I'm okay with Draymond Green here for playmaking. Rebounding, they have Dennis Rodman. Now, one thing I do have to consider is Dennis Rodman is one of the greatest rebounders of all time. And he's not a 7-footer. Dennis Rodman was only about 6'7", and battling with every big you could imagine during his time playing in the NBA. And on his career, grabbed just shy of 15 rebounds per game, which is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I'm okay with Dennis Rodman, and I'm going to go Dennis Rodman too, but I would not have a problem if anybody were to say, the hell with Rodman. I'm going Jerry Lucas. Jerry Lucas grabbed 18 rebounds per game. Now, he was 2 inches taller than Rodman, but he still wasn't a 7-footer. Jerry Lucas played from the 1960s into the mid, maybe late-ish 1970s. And also, I wouldn't have a problem if you wanted to go Bob Pettit, who grabbed 16 rebounds per game. And I think he was maybe only an inch taller than Dennis Rodman. And Bob Pettit played from the 1950s, actually, even earlier than Jerry Lucas, into the 1960s. So, very different eras of basketball, and I think the average height for players in the 50s, 60s, and maybe somewhat into the 70s, but definitely 50s, 60s, was probably just slightly smaller than the height of the players Dennis Rodman was dealing with in the 90s. However, the NBA had expanded much more since Rodman was around, as opposed to how few teams and players they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's something I take into consideration as well. And you can look at it from both ways as far as a pro and a con perspective. So I wouldn't have a problem with Jerry Lucas or Bob Pettit. If you know me on this channel, I'm one of the guys that's like, yeah, we don't forget about the players of the past. They were great too, no question about it. So I definitely wouldn't have a problem if you wanted to go Jerry Lucas and Bob Pettit from that perspective. Also, Dennis Rodman is one of the greatest offensive rebounds in the history of the NBA, with 4.8 offensive rebounds per game, only second to Moses Malone. And Moses Malone was one of those people where people questioned Moses Malone's offensive rebounding. Some people thought Moses would miss shots on purpose just to grab the offensive rebound and put it back up. I can't confirm or deny. That's just what I've read. That's just what I've heard. But I don't know, and nor do I really care that much, to be honest. Dennis Rodman is also tied in first place for most offensive rebounds grabbed in a game with 18, tied only with, you won't believe who, Zaza Pachulia. But yeah, that's the other guy that's had 18 offensive rebounds in a game. Now, to be fair, offensive and defensive rebounds did not officially start to be recorded until the 1973-1974 season, so I have to add that. It's an important piece of context that we cannot leave out. But I'm going Dennis Rodman. Next, for three-point shooting, they have Dirk Nowitzki as the greatest three-point shooting power forward of all time. You have no argument from me. I can't think of anybody else that could really rival Dirk Nowitzki in three-point shooting. And I'm not, like I said, y'all know me, I just don't look at percentages at face value, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking from what, I take that into consideration and what I've seen, Dirk's ability to score the three ball in a variety of ways at 7 foot, where it doesn't matter really how good a defense you play on this guy, he's still going to get a clean look off on you. Yeah, I'm going Dirk. Mid-range shooting. They've picked Dirk Nowitzki. Now, there have been a lot of good, great, fantastic mid-range shooters at the power forward position over the course of NBA history. You know, you could make arguments for Kevin Garnett. He was a great mid-range shooter. Wasn't as versatile as Dirk Nowitzki, but he could shoot it sometimes off the dribble. Wasn't a big over dribbler, but could do it with his back to the basket in the mid-range, post or face up, one dribble, pull up, shoot, or off the catch. Tim Duncan was a fantastic mid-range shooter. We all know him for being called the big fundamentalist, or the big fundamental, whatever it was. I think it was the big fundamental. And he had a remarkable ability to shoot that mid-range ball off glass so perfectly, so many times. Textbook basketball at the mid-range was Tim Duncan. But he didn't overly assert himself. Tim Duncan could score in a variety of ways, in the paint, in the post, in the mid-range. But he played within pop system, and usually it would be when plays were called for him. It was more catch and shoot for Duncan than isolation when it came to the mid-range. Chris Bosh. I know a lot of people make fun of that guy and try to act like he wasn't an all-star player when he got to the Miami Heat, but he was. Chris Bosh was a pretty damn good mid-range jump shooter. He could even shoot out to three, too. And in some ways, he was very similar to KG in their offensive skill set, though not as physical as Kevin Garnett, but in many ways shared some resemblance with scoring like Kevin Garnett did. Kevin McHale was a fantastic mid-range shooter. Kevin McHale could give it to you off the pass anywhere on the court. Had some great passers on that Boston Celtics team. And Kevin McHale could give it to you in isolation. They called him the black hole for a reason. Once you dump the ball into Kevin McHale, he probably wasn't going to pass it back. You have just dropped the ball into a black hole, and Kevin McHale was looking to score. And I've seen this guy. He has some of the best footwork you will ever see in the NBA. Not just at his position, ever in the NBA. He has some of the best footwork you will ever see. And he was fantastic in all areas of the mid-range, including in isolation, was Kevin McHale. Sweet fadeaway, man. Sweet fadeaway, man. Pau Gasol had a very strong mid-range game. LaMarcus Aldridge, Karl Malone, Chris Webber. All these guys could shoot the mid-range pretty damn good. But with all that being said, I still think Dirk is the best option here if you're looking for a mid-range jump shot. 7 foot, could put the ball on the floor, decent ball handling, especially considering his size. Not that he needed to over dribble given his size. He could play in the post, he could play back to the basket. 7-footer fading away on a mid range jumper. Good luck blocking that, especially with his release. I'm okay with Dirk Nowitzki. Passing. They're going Draymond Green, which they went Draymond Green for playmaking, and I agreed with them. Draymond Green for playmaking. But specifically passing, some of you are going to disagree with me, and I know you will. But I've seen some great passing power forwards, bigs in general, in my time. And I do not think that Draymond Green is the best passing power forward I have ever seen. Me personally, the best passing power forward I've seen, and I may be handcuffed to the eras that I watch more than anything, so forgive me if I'm forgetting somebody, in the 70s, in those 80s, that I just am unaware of, and I'm open to learning more about this player. If you have somebody back then that you thought was a better passer than the player I'm about to say, or Draymond, please let me know in the comment section. But for me, and for what I've seen, and I've seen a decent amount of, players in the past play, I'm going Chris Webber. I'm going Chris Webber as the best passing power forward. Now, you may look at the stats. Well, Draymond Green averaged more assists per game than Chris Webber. Draymond Green averaging 5.6 assists per game as compared to Chris Webber's 4.2 assists per game. But like I always say, statistics aren't everything. All right. Draymond Green, like I said, his primary responsibility is to play make, and passing is something that's included in that. So he's going to have the opportunity to make the passes after putting players in their positions, running the sets, than Chris Webber would be, because Chris Webber had a lot more responsibility, especially on the offensive end, than Draymond Green. So creating and dropping dimes was just part of Chris Webber's responsibility. I feel like if Chris Webber primary goal was to play make and to pass, I think Chris Webber would average more assists than Draymond Green. But it wasn't. So only having a little over one more assist per game, given that wasn't Webber's main role, and Webber was looked at to score even more than he was looked to pass. On his career, Chris Webber is a over 20 point per game scorer. There was a season where he averaged like 27 or 28 points per game. And even a season where he averaged 24 or 25. Like, he was looked at to score too. So I have to take that into consideration. So being the fact that he was most often, especially during his prime, one of the primary scorers on the team, if not the primary scorer on the team, also while giving out 4 assists on his career. That's just on his career. So you better believe there were seasons in there where he averaged more than 4 assists in his prime. Also, stylistically, Chris Webber would throw some of the most beautiful passes you'd ever see from a power forward. Chris Webber had a shining ability to pass the basketball. And I'm not joking. No looks, fancy dancy, behind the back, over your head. I'm telling you, go look at my amazing plays list. I actually did. I think it was a Chris Webber pass on my amazing plays playlist that I highlighted. C-Web could pass the ball, man. Face up, top of the key, from the post, you name it. So, yeah, I'm going Chris Webber, not Draymond Green. I'm not a prisoner of surface value statistics. So, I watched both of these guys play their careers, and Chris Webber was the more talented passer and damn near average almost as many assists without playmaking being his, or passing having to be his, primary duty. So C-Web. Defense, this is a good one. You could name a handful of power forwards that have an argument for being the greatest defensive power forward of all time, or have, maybe if you don't even say an argument, but have very solid defensive accolades and a career on the defensive end. But I really think this comes down to 2 players And they have Dennis Rodman. And I think Dennis Rodman is definitely one of those players. And I think the other person that could give Rodman a run for his money would be Tim Duncan. All right. Tim Duncan has a total of 15 all defensive selections. And I think 8 of those being first team and 7 being second team. That's incredible, by the way. 15 all defensive selections on your career. Tim Duncan primarily guarded centers and power forwards. All right. Now, Dennis Rodman only had 8 all defensive selections, so Tim Duncan had almost twice as much. And Dennis Rodman had 7 first team and 1 second team. So from that perspective, you just looking at it for what it is, it's like, well, Duncan has almost twice as many all defensive selections. Now, stand by. Dennis Rodman didn't play as long as a career as Tim Duncan, but let's also consider this for Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was also a 2 times Defensive Player of the Year. Make no mistake about that. And defense was pretty much one of his staples, along with rebounding, was Dennis Rodman. Rebounding and defense. And securing the rebound, the defensive rebound, is also part of defense, because now you've secured it and now you can go on the offensive end. And Rodman's one of the greatest rebounders ever. And I voted the greatest rebounder ever. So there you go. Two Defensive Player of the Year awards. You cannot frown on that. But the other thing, even if you wanted to be like, well, okay, I see that the 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, all right, you calculate that with his 8 defensive selections. You know what? I still say the 15, I still call him even. But Dennis Rodman could legitimately guard all 5 positions on the floor. Tim Duncan, 2. Dennis Rodman, 5. None of this fake LeBron James BS, where LeBron James only guards centers when they're throwing out small ball lineups and he's bigger than everybody else. Or LeBron James comes over for help defense and blocks a center from behind, and then the narrative is, oh my God, LeBron James blocked a center on help defense. Oh, LeBron James is guarding the 5 position. This is the type of stuff that happens. None of that BS. People, please stop. Dennis Rodman legitimately guarded centers for the durations of entire games. Guarded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Guarded point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center, and was effective at all 5 positions. 6'7" Dennis Rodman, having to guard players like Shaquille O'Neal for lengthy parts of a game, David Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon, all kinds of players, small stature players, tall stature players, fast players, slow players, powerful players, nimble players, it didn't matter. And most times he had success. Most times, granted, the greats, they're gonna have their way with Rodman. But there were times he had his way with them too. You gotta go Dennis Rodman. All 5 positions, legitimately, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and 8 all defensive team selections, and a relatively shorter career. I gotta go Dennis Rodman. All right. Finishing, they're going Tim Duncan. Now, when they say finishing, based on what I've seen from the other iterations of these rankings, I believe the definition is finishing at the basket, at the rim. And you could mention a lot of power forwards here, but while Tim Duncan did have a mid-range game and he did utilize it, he was still more effective and operated more in the post, closer to the basket, at his position. So I won't argue if you want to put Timmy. You're not going to have an argument for me. I think it's warranted and there's good validation there. But me personally, I'm going Giannis Antetokounmpo for finishing. Giannis is practically the paint. Giannis does not operate well outside of the paint, though he has made marginal gains over the last couple years as he has tried and practiced to improve his mid-range shooting and his jump shooting as a whole. He's still ineffective from there, but he's gotten a little bit better. But he still primarily thrives inside the paint. That is Giannis Antetokounmpo. That is his bread and butter. However he can get there. Head down, bulldozing through people, Euro stepping in there, cutting, slashing in there. Now he's starting to develop a little bit of a post game now. Also, it seems like he just met up with Hakeem Olajuwon in Houston. Looks like he's going to start working on his post game even more. Something that I've been clamoring for him to do and for the coaching staff to get him to do for years now. Let Giannis work without the basketball, get his position, then dump it into him. And if he has to pass out and he has to reseat himself, dish it back into him. He has the length, he has the strength, he has the athleticism, the agility to make it work. These are the ways you should be feeding Giannis more. And he's started to do that more over the last couple of years, and now it looks like they might be emphasizing it more, or at least he will be, now that it looks like he's trying to pay even more attention to his post-game abilities. But Giannis, that's his bread and butter, man. Even last season, I don't know how he finished the season, but like at the midway point or just after the midway point, he was sitting upwards of 75% of his points in the paint. 75%. So I have to go Giannis Antetokounmpo. That is where he thrives. That is where he eats. And it's really the only place on the floor where he's truly comfortable and he's truly efficient and effective. I have to go Giannis there. Athleticism, they're going Giannis Antetokounmpo. I can't even think of any power forward in the history of our game that can truly rival Giannis's athleticism. The dude is the Greek freak for a reason. The things he can do with his athletic abilities are incredible. I'm going Giannis. Clutch, they're going Dirk. We've had some clutch power forwards, but I can honestly say that Dirk is probably the most clutch power forward we've seen in the history of our game, especially that Dirk is one of those guys where you don't have to set him up. You know, ideally you would like to give him easiest shot as possible, but Dirk, you can just give him the ball. He can chew up time on the clock and let him go to work, and he'll be able to create some magic. All right? I'm going Dirk. Efficiency, they've picked Anthony Davis. I'm guessing they're not just looking at field goal percentage or three-point percentage or whatever. I don't know really how they're calculating efficiency. But I'm going to assume they're looking at the player efficiency ranking, PER. I'm sure you guys have heard of that before. If you don't know what it is, it's a per minute rating of a player where it takes all their positive accomplishments and then subtracts their negative accomplishments from that and returns a per minute rating of that specific player. That's how the calculation is generally, without getting into the actual formula. So I guess they're looking at that because all time Anthony Davis on his career is fourth in PER at 26.96 PER rating. Number 4. But, and he would be the only power forward that high as well. So he has the highest rating for a power forward in the history of the NBA. But here's my problem with AD. First of all, let me just say this. After looking at it all, I had to take a look at this one because I had to think about it. I have to go Bob Pettit. Bob Pettit, not as high as Anthony Davis, is still in the top 10 in PER. And Anthony Davis has a 26.96. And Bob Pettit has a 25.45, so just over one and some change more than Bob Pettit. But here's my thing with Anthony Davis is that Anthony Davis's PER should be much higher than what it already is, given what I know he is capable of and his abilities. But everything with Anthony Davis is potentially this, potentially that, potentially this, potentially that. So for me, I'm knocking some points off Anthony Davis for not having a higher PER. When I look at the fact that on his career, he has 26.96, and Nikola Jokic on his career has 27.65. And Nikola Jokic does not get all of isn't the defender Anthony Davis is. So he's not getting as many points on the positive end for his defensive abilities and statistics as Anthony Davis is. But Anthony Davis can be just as skilled offensively as Nikola Jokic with everything except passing. He's just not as good of a passer as Nikola Jokic. But he can go blow for blow with him for scoring, maybe even usurp him in scoring abilities, given his length and his athletic ability. But he doesn't, because he doesn't assert himself. He's not built like that. He doesn't have that alpha dog mentality. He doesn't. So considering how close he is to Nikola Jokic, and the fact that he is a far superior defensive player than Nikola Jokic, tells you how much he's leaving on the table on the offensive end. His PR should be much better than what it is, especially also considering that every night on the basketball court, damn near every single night, Anthony Davis is far taller and larger than everybody else on the floor, especially in this era of small ball. And he still does not assert his size and take advantage of all these smaller players. Anthony Davis should be scoring like 35 to 38 points per game, but he doesn't assert himself. And we've seen him do it in small patches, and then he reverts to his model of inconsistency and then turns into a role player one game and then an all-star one game. You just don't know what you're getting with Anthony Davis. Flip a coin. I'm knocking points off from him. I got to. Given this era, given what he's capable of doing, he should have a much better PER than what we're even giving him credit for. So no, I'm giving it to Bob Pettit. Hell out of here, Anthony Davis. You may argue I'm very hard on Anthony Davis. I'm very critical on AD. Maybe I am. I can say that. Maybe I am. But you know what? I'm tired of this guy. I'm tired of his inconsistency, and I'm tired of him falling so far short of his potential, but also acting like he's not and acting like he's better than what he is. So no, get the hell out of here. Leadership, Tim Duncan, no argument there. How can you argue against Tim Duncan being the greatest leader at the power forward position? You got that one, Timmy. Versatility, Giannis Antetokounmpo, no argument there. Given Giannis's ability to what he can do on both ends of the floor, guarding 45 positions on the court, with his length, his athletic ability, his agility, and then what he can do on the offensive end. Honestly, we know what he can do in the paint, and we know he's not much of a scorer on jump shots. However, Giannis Antetokounmpo is a very underrated playmaker and passer. Doesn't get enough credit for that. So he is very versatile from that perspective. Can handle the ball at the top of the key, create for other players, cause mismatches, do work without the basketball, and do practically anything he wants to on the defensive end. You gotta go Giannis. Ball handling, they're going Anthony Davis. Again, get the hell out of here, Anthony Davis. Hell no. Hell no, hell no, hell no. No. I think Chris Webber is a better ball handler than Anthony Davis. I think Lamar Odom is a better ball handler than Anthony Davis. In fact, you could probably go down the history of the league and think about some better power forwards that can handle the ball than Anthony Davis. Those are just two off the top of my head. But I'm going to tell you who I think is the best ball handler at the power forward position. And this isn't a superstar player. He's not an all-star player. Might even be a guy you never heard of before, unless you were just a basketball aficionado in the late 2000s on. Okay, so you might not even heard of this guy, but this isn't based on if you're an all-star or a legend or an icon. This is just at the position. So ball handling, I'm going Andre Blatch. Yeah. If you don't know who that is, go ahead and look him up. And he's not a very popular player, so I don't know how much footage you're actually going to find on this guy, being that he was never an all-star or anything like that. But Andre Blatch was like 6'11". I don't remember all the teams he played for, but I know that he played for the Brooklyn Nets. And this guy could really handle the basketball. I'm telling you. Sometimes I not even a Brooklyn Nets fan, especially during that time. They weren't a very good team. But I'd be like, oh, shoot, is Andre Blatch in? Let me see if we see him do something crazy. This dude, ball handling, left hand, right hand, could do some Rucker Park stuff between the legs, step back, behind the back, pump fake, footwork, all that. Andre Blatch could handle the basketball and was a far superior ball handler than Anthony Davis. I'm sorry, I'm not going there. I'm not. Andre Blatch was just better. And if I could find some footage, I'll do a reaction video to it. If I could find some ball handling footage, but super underrated handles, Andre Blatch. But some of it has to do with your cachet, if you will. All right, and the best power forward of all time, they have Tim Duncan, and I'm sure everybody else has Tim Duncan too. Actually, did I mention Kevin Garnett for ball handling? By the way, KG had some decent ball handling skills too, make no mistake about it, and could run the fast break. My bad, KG. And you could have mentioned KG for defense too. My bad. And you could have mentioned KG for leadership too. My bad, KG. You wouldn't have made number one on any of those lists, but I think I should have brought your name up in some other ones. So my disrespect for that, Kevin Garnett. But yeah, Tim Duncan, the greatest power forward of all time. No argument there. Anyway, that's my list. That's my critique. That's my opinion. Please let me know, do you agree with me on any of my takes? Please tell me why. What would your player be in any of these positions? Let me know your opinion. Let me know where you rank each of these players at their respective spot. Who would you like to see there instead of the ones that they have? At the end of the day, it's all an opinion. But let me know what you think about it. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and I'll catch you on the next one. We out, baby.